Hi, I'm Jim Snell in the USA, and here we go. After draining the coolant from the water pump and cooling system and then removing the outer clutch cover and inner clutch cover and the clutch mechanism, we can then begin to address and adjust or repair anything that is a problem in the shifting mechanism. Diagnosis and adjustment or repair of the gear selector shifting mechanism. If the shift pedal is sticking when you're selecting gear and doesn't seem to snap back to that neutral position to get to the next gear, it could be that you have just a minor problem in the area here where there's a C-shaped retention plate that holds these parts against the drum. You can see here that it's staying up in the upshift, and we take a little bit of a nudge and it goes back down. In this particular instance, it's a small burr on that shifting retention plate that's shaped like a C. In this video from the factory, Paco here shows that it tends to be wanting to stick and not make the second click. There are two clicks. The first one is when the gear is selected, and the second very minute click is when the pawls fall back into place to prepare to get the next gear. And on this machine here, the adjustment Paco does is simply to loosen that screw there on that retention plate and then wiggle the parts and then retighten it. It was just a very, very minor imperfection or misalignment. On older bikes that have some use, possibly there's some wear on this plate or a small burr. So you can take that plate off and inspect it carefully to be sure that it's flat and that there are no uneven surfaces on that back side of it where it rubs against that component in the shifting mechanism. If necessary, take some fine sandpaper, 220 grit or something, and smooth that out. Alternatively, you may need to take a look at the shift ball tension spring. Perhaps it's not pressing hard enough to cause the drum to fall down into the center position and select the next gear for the second click. The spring looks like this, and it's approximately 29-30 millimeters free length. You can replace it, or you can simply shim it with a couple of washers like I show here. This may solve your problem as well. Always remember, when working on this area, these parts must be lubricated. The bike will not shift well if the parts have been apart and they are still dry. Alternatively, you may need to make an adjustment to the actual shifting return spring. If over time the shift pedal seems to be getting a little loose, it could be that the tension on this spring just needs to be readjusted. Here Paco shows that he's shifting it and he's not actually hearing that second click. So what he needs to do here is he needs to move the tips of this spring here so that it moves that mechanism down just a little farther. So he takes an Allen wrench, a strong one, and he places it under the spring and he slightly bends the bottom part of the spring so that the end of it is going down a little bit. Then he bends the top part of the spring with a pair of pliers, and what he's done here is he's slightly moved the position of that little bushing there in relation to the position of the shifting shaft, and now he has his second click and it's falling into position to select the next gear. It's that easy. With a little trial and error, you should have your bike shifting perfectly again. Alternatively, you may wish to replace this little spring. Perhaps on a bike with a lot of time on it, the spring is getting a little tired. Keep in mind, it may be necessary to actually make adjustments to a new spring as well. First, we withdraw the shifting shaft. It comes right out, and be aware there's a flat washer, a machined one, that sits right there. So pick that up and make sure that gets put back on the shifting shaft so you don't lose track of it later. As you can see here, I've slid it over the shaft. Then there's a small bushing that sits right here on this pin on the shifting mechanism. You can see I'm picking it up here. You can see the wider part faces down. There are two Allen bolts that hold this retention ring over the shifting mechanism. Take that off. Don't lose track of those two bolts. One's a little different than the other. And you can see I set that little bushing in the middle there so I wouldn't lose track of where it is. And then we can pull off this spring-loaded shifting pawl piece. It has two little levers, and two little buttons, and two little springs. It can fly apart if you're not careful, so watch out when you take that out. I'm showing you here how it goes together, how those little levers sit in there, and those little pins are hollow on one end so the spring can go in there. Got some good detail shots for you here in case it comes apart on you and you need to put it back together. Thank you for watching my video.